All right, I'm going to get started. I see most people, I think, have entered in, and some people are still coming in, but I will get started because I know we've got a lot to talk about in this hour. And I'm thankful for our panelists for joining us today, and I'm thankful for all of our attendees for spending this hour with us on such an important topic. I'm Nicole Mahoney, and I'm CEO of Travel Alliance Partnership. We're also known as TAP. And I'm the podcast host of Destination on the Left, a show focused on creativity and collaboration in the travel and tourism industry. And because of my show, I get to meet a lot of great people from all over the industry, some who are attending today, but also the folks who are here in the conversation I've met through various ways, but also have all been on my podcast. And I want to welcome everyone to our second in a series of community conversations that TAP is hosting in 2025. We know that there are a lot of changes happening in the travel and tourism industry, and it can be hard to keep up. And our goal is to support our travel community by being proactive and forward focused. So we realize that things can happen that are beyond our control. And we also know that what we control is how we react to them or don't react to them. And so my hope is that today's conversation is the start and not the end of an ongoing forward-focused collaboration within the travel industry that helps us navigate all kinds of uncertainty and change. So attendees of this webinar cover a broad base of the travel ecosystem. Just so you know who's in the audience with you. We've got DMOs, attractions, accommodations, tour operators, travel advisors, freelance travel writers, industry associations, and consultants. So I'm very, very thrilled that so many folks find this topic to be important to their work. And we've identified 8 questions that we hope to get through in about 40 to 45 minutes. In order to leave time at the end for any questions submitted through the chat. So feel free to write in your questions as they come to you. You don't have to wait. We'll do our best to get to most of those before the hour is up. And with that, I want to welcome our panelists. Thank you so much for joining me, Karen, Lauren, and Ronnie. I would love to have you introduce yourself. And when you do introduce yourself, for context, tell us a little about your destination or your organization and why, when I'm going to call, and Ronnie will tell us there's different ways to think about this, but DEAI initiatives are important to you. And since I said your name first, Ronnie, let's start with you.
Hi, I'm Ronnie Weiss, Executive Director of Travel Unity. We're a nonprofit focused on making travel welcoming to everybody. It's the core of what we do. We want to make sure that everybody feels like traveling and going out to the world is something that where they're going to feel welcome and like they belong and like they're going to have great experiences, both as those consumers, those travelers, those guests, and as potential members of the travel industry as well.
Love it. Thank you. And Lauren, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, I'm Lauren Sackett. I'm the CEO of the Rhinelander Area Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center in northern Wisconsin, Oneida County, which is ironic because there's an Oneida County in New York over by you. But we are home to more than 1,100 lakes and miles of trails, and it's a place where outdoor recreation thrives. And so for us, in the projects that we were working on, being welcoming for all meant removing barriers for us and how we can work as a county to ensure that regardless of background or ability, people could explore and move about our destination in a way that worked for them.
Love it, and we'll get more into that story as well. And Karen, can you introduce yourself?
Sure thing. I'm Karen Kuhl. I'm the Executive Director for Cayuga County in the Finger Lakes region of New York State. I've been in this position for about going on 7 years, and it's been a roller coaster of beautiful experiences. Most centrally focused on being a welcome destination for all. Towards the beginning of my tenure here, I encountered Travel Unity. And when there was an organization whose primary focus was to ensure that tourism was welcoming to all, I knew that's something that I wanted to be involved in, because Cayuga County is the chosen home of Harriet Tubman, and under her umbrella, in an effort to make the destination under her, keeping her elevated in everything we do, being welcoming to everybody was central to our work. The area of New York State is also has a lot of equal rights history. So a lot of our cultural historical sites are focused on this concept. So it was just a given that it would be something that we would focus on.
Yeah, and we'll get into more of that story as well, because I think it's interesting when you can take a central historical figure like that and kind of put it into your community in such a way that actually changes kind of what your community rallies around. And Karen, you've done a great job doing that. So I'm excited for you to share. But before we get to that, I'd love to just kind of explore this idea of social impact. And I'm wondering, from your viewpoint, what does social impact mean through a tourism lens? And Karen, can we start with you?
Sure. A lot of the work that we do is centered on the community. Tourism is not just for the visitor who comes here, but for the resident who lives here. So having that focus in impact, social community impact, kind of it revolves around all of it. So is making sure that everybody can participate and trying to support our partners to understand what that means. Opening your doors to the public is one thing, but knowing that you're opening your doors to the public for everyone to come through the doors is understanding that filter, that lens of it. And that's the way we look at the social impact of it, is going to the community and going to the partners and having that conversation start there.
Absolutely. And how about you, Ronnie? What does that mean, to you, social impact through a tourism lens?
So we consider our work to be a subset of sustainability. I think a lot of times when people think about sustainability, they think about the natural world, the environment, carbon emissions, things like that. I'm a big believer in the word sustainability meaning to sustain, to keep things going, which is also why people push back and go, no, we want regenerative, regardless, whether you're trying to not have erosion or trying to make things better. You can't do that without thinking about the human beings that are part of this ecosystem that you're dealing with. So Travel Unity has publicly available standards around inclusion that are focused on the 3 different ways we see the travel industry engaging with people: leadership and workforce, so your day-to-day folks who are engaging with that product, doing the marketing, etc. Community, and as we're going to talk about today, so much of the products within travel industry are directly tied to those communities, and then the travelers themselves. So when we're talking about social impact, I would say, yes, we should be thinking about the communities we're engaging with. We should also be thinking about every human being that is affected by the travel industry.
Fabulous. And Lauren, how about you? From your viewpoint, what does social impact mean?
Yeah, I think I'd echo a little bit what Karen was talking about, and tourism isn't just about bringing travelers in, it's about your community as a whole. And we're a rural community, and so sometimes things up here lag a little bit behind maybe across the nation, and so we're trying to make sure that our community isn't left behind in conversations. We also have an aging population up here, so we know that all of the work that we are putting in is not only going to help people with disabilities and diverse travelers, it's going to help our own population. And so we're just trying to show that smaller towns here in the northwoods of Wisconsin can help lead and be involved in these kinds of conversations.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I appreciate you talking about the size of your community, or that you are a rural community. Karen is also from a rural community. And what I appreciate about both of you joining us is that this type of work can be done by any size organization, destination, or company. And I think it's all about maybe how you kind of approach it. And so I'm wondering, Lauren, if you can talk a little bit about how your organization has implemented DEAI initiatives and what they've meant to your community and your destination.
Yeah. So starting in 2022, our county as a whole, we have a regional county group, Oneida County Tourism Council, where 3 of our communities got together along with elected officials in our county that sit on this committee to try to start to make those intentional efforts to become more inclusive and more welcoming. We did form a committee of local businesses and people that wanted to be involved in this conversation. And we partnered with a Native American female-owned firm. We are surrounded by various tribal communities up here in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. And so we worked with her to help kind of guide the work we were doing. We did get some state grant funding to help us do this research, but involved a lot of research and surveying. And then from there, what we really kind of honed in on was that our travelers wanted to see more accessibility focus, as well as the ability to find diverse owned businesses up here in the Northwoods. So what we had done, it was kind of a 2-part project. The first part was building out more of our website to be able to showcase those diverse owned businesses through a pretty extensive filtration system so they can find businesses. And then we also worked on our trail accessibility. So that involved a deep dive into our area trails, which we have about 40 in the county. How accessible are they? We GIS mapped all of them digitally, got them all uploaded with extensive photos so people can see the trails that they would be going to. And then worked with our county for some federal ARPA funding to do printed pieces and things from that as well. So it was a really collaborative project with our committee of individuals, and it was really a way that we wanted to grow upon our messaging and how we are able to share the offerings of our community.
Fabulous. And what has that led to? What, like, how are you measuring the success of these programs through the website or through the Trails project?
Yeah. So we are working on measuring that, but a couple of cool things that have come out of the work that we have been able to do is we've been able to host some large scale accessible centered events in our community. So a couple of years ago, we hosted the U.S. Deaf Golf Championship at a golf course up here. And so they were in our community for several days experiencing the Northwoods. And then a couple of winters ago, not this last season, but the season before, we hosted Ski for Light, which is a blind, visually impaired, mobility impaired cross-country ski clinic and race. They were in our community for about a week. And so our ability to kind of look at everything we were doing and know what was available in our community really helped us work with those events coming into town. How can we assist them to host their event and do it in a way that would work best for them?
Wow.
Great, love it. All right, Karen, same question. Share how your community has implemented DEAI initiatives and what they've meant to your destination.
We've done so much. I was listening to Lauren. I was very impressed with a lot of the projects that you're working on. And I'll start our journey a little more baseline, I guess, when we decided to elevate the message of Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown. We were very cautious on the lane that we were treading down on, because like you said, Nicole, it's very interesting to center the identity of the destination under an individual, because there's a lot more responsibility associated with that, especially when there's a lot of relatives that are still living here from that individual. So you have a lot of responsibility. So before we did anything, we looked inwardly. Who are we to be walking down this lane? So we looked at our internal documents, we looked at our strategic plan, we looked at our bylaws, we had conversations with our board of directors to make sure that we were trying to walk as authentically as possible. We went through Travel Unity's or certification for an organization to kind of help us look with a third-party perspective, so that we could remove any biases that we might have that we are unaware of. And then we started getting community members involved. And then we brought the community in. We brought organizations that still live under and promote Harriet Tubman's legacy to kind of bring the language together before we actually started talking to the public. Then we received a lot of research. We went through and we purchased the Black Traveler research from the Black Travel Alliance and Vistas Latinas from MMGY. If we're going to be talking to this public and promoting the public to come here, we wanted to understand better how we are going forward. As far as specific programs, which is part of the question you asked, I'll call out a couple of them. As the Finger Lakes region, we are working with Wheel the World to assess the destination to see how accessible it is to the public with mobility challenges. And once again, we wanted a third party to tell us how we're doing instead of us kind of judging ourselves. The beautiful thing about the way that they do it is not a pass or fail. It's like, this is where you're excelling, and that's what they put in the public facing part of it. But you also receive a document saying how you can improve. These are the areas available for improvement. So every location that we work with gets this kind of step forward and support. We're also work closely with the Black Travel Alliance to attract the Black traveler to Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown. And we have them kind of help us ensure that the narrative that we use is not only authentic and supportive of the destination, but speaks to the public in a respectful, authentic way as well. We are bringing the Creators Weekend to Auburn. It is an initiative that they have put together where they put several content creators underneath the, you kind of pick a theme that you're working on, whether it's writing or photography and such, and they get some classes from a professional, and then they go out in the field and they work. But it helps us understand the public that we're attracting that way too. So just a couple of examples.
All right, fabulous. I'm sure we'll get some more. I know you've got a lot of examples to share, and so I appreciate you picking one of the lanes. And so Ronnie, how about you? Talk a little bit about how your organization, I would say, helps or implements these types of initiatives.
So I think the first thing to note based off of what Lauren said is that there's an easy and obvious business case for doing this work. Yelp, a few years ago at this point, added attributes of whether something was Black owned, Latinx owned, etc. And they didn't do it to be woke. They did it because they were finding search results that people wanted to be supporting Black-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, disability-owned businesses, etc. And I would say that for any destination or anybody who's bringing together different products, is people want to see those products and they want to support those businesses. So yes, there is an equity and justice and all of that aspect to it. There's also the very direct through line of give customers what they want. So that as a jumping off point, for us, we work with organizations, Karen's mentioned it a few times, to help everybody at all levels within an organization to understand what this work is. So what is it to understand how identity impacts people's experiences? What is it to implement inclusivity within your scope of your role, which is what we do in our manager level certification? What is it as a leader of an organization to create a plan and to align that with a plan or other objectives, because a lot of the time an strategic
Oh, isn't that how it works?
organization either comes in just very generically going, we care about this, but not actually having any plan to implement it. It's great being ones that are actually doing so well from it. So how do they implement it? And then within the leadership level training, that's what we do there. To Karen's point on the organizational certification, that's us validating that organizations are aligning with those standards, because it comes down to how are you going to figure out what you're going to do, how are you going to do it, and then how do you make sure that you actually met the objectives that you were setting out to do. So that's how we work with organizations to help them with that awareness. And I'd say, with awareness overall, the first thing when you're thinking about the diversity side of all of this is that you will make mistakes, and mistakes are very subjective. People think about mistakes a lot of times, oh no, I did this, but mistakes can be that somebody thinks you did something wrong, but you don't think you did, or your team has actually thought this through in depth. So making sure that as much as possible, one, you can justify the decisions you're making, and then accepting that not everybody's going to be happy with those is just the nature of what this work is. You can't do all of it at once, especially for smaller organizations that are represented here. So going, okay, this is what we're focusing on, this is what we're going to go to next, is I wouldn't just say the best way, but in some ways the only way to actually do this work, because otherwise you're spinning in circles, or you're trying to come up with this grand thing when it might not even be within the scope of what's realistic or appropriate for your organization. You really need to go, what is our lane, establish that lane, and then make your goals and apply them.
Great advice. I love that. So I wanted to ask how you are seeing DEAI evolve in 2025, and if you're seeing any challenges, how you might be changing your approach, or what are you doing that might be different in 2025. And I'm going to start with you, Karen. If you could share, what are you seeing, or how are you seeing this evolve? I mean, we called this Welcoming All 2.0, and I picked that title on purpose because I know it is evolving. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, how are you seeing this evolve?
Sure. You start with me, and one of the hardest questions in all of it, when you sent me the proposed questions, I'm like, all right, this is the most challenging one. It's no secret to anybody on this call that the word DEI has become weaponized in the United States. I have a lot of friends, relatives, and colleagues worldwide, and that's the first question they ask. And it has made our work challenging, because as I stated a couple times, being an inclusive destination is a priority for us. It is a priority for our board of directors. It is a priority for our staff. It is a priority for the majority of our partners, our tourism partners in the county. But now it's figuring out how to navigate this work and continue the work without bringing attention that you're doing the work, right? Because you don't want to be called out, you don't want to be signaled out, and funding is another big thing for a lot of our partners. Our cultural historical sites are already suffering cutbacks from grants, especially federal, and they don't want this to become part of the question. So it's a lot of conversations with them, it's conversations with our board of directors. Is this still the path that we are prioritizing? Are these still the words that we are using? And how do we continue the priority? For our organization, it is still a high priority. The board of directors continue saying we are doing this, and this is important to us and to our destination. We just finished a strategic plan in which it's highlighted. It is very prominently mentioned throughout the strategic plan that this is something that is a pillar of the work that will continue. Well, we've seen challenges. I mean, we are part of the initiative to develop the Harriet Tubman Underground Railroad Scenic Byway in New York State, which requires every single municipality along the route, including towns, villages, counties, to sign a resolution of support. And we have several towns who have expressed concern, and they rather not be highlighted as being part of this initiative because of the attention that it brings. So yes, there's a lot of challenges out there. It's just learning how to navigate them, how to rephrase the conversation, and keep talking about inclusivity and welcoming to everybody.
Yeah, and I appreciate, I know it's a tough question, but I appreciate your honesty and transparency, because that's why we chose this topic for this time, because I know a lot of us are navigating through that. So Lauren, how about you from your perspective? How are you seeing this evolve and how are you approaching it?
Yeah, I mean, very similar experiences here for us as what Karen has shared. And, you know, we're just trying to evolve. It's a challenge right now, sustaining momentum for us. And part of that is related to funding and budgets and staffing. We're a small organization. There are several entities within our community doing this work. So now it's really us trying to more focus on those partnerships and how we can leverage our collaborations and shared tools to move things forward. And that's why as we started this county project as a county versus an individual community. But yeah, we are facing those challenges of forward momentum and kind of evaluating where we're at, being honest about where we're at and then where we feel like we can continue to move. It's kind of, yeah, difficult time.
But what I'm hearing is you're continuing to move forward, right? And to figure out and to navigate. Sounds like, and I appreciate too Karen's point about this is part of our strategic plan. And Lauren, you've invested a lot of time. I mean, you're not going to stop the work. So I appreciate that insight as well. And Ronnie, what are you seeing? How are you seeing this evolve? I know you get a broader lens of across the country of all types of destinations. What is your thought on it?
I see this as kind of two levels. The first is you can do DEI work without ever saying DEI or any of the words within it. What I found, and that was how I was starting the year talking about this. What I found though is that there is a genericizing, making things generic in a way that I don't totally agree is doing the work as much. If you go from saying, hey, we did DEI before to now saying we're welcoming everybody and it's just words, well, that's not good enough in and of itself because it's got to be other stuff too. But if you're not thinking about the fact that different groups and different identities have different needs, then it's not doing the work. So I'm not going to go so far to say it's performative, but you could potentially argue that going from doing DEI work and calling it DEI to just saying that we're welcoming everybody and then not doing stuff is no longer doing the work. And I've unfortunately seen some organizations that I think have walked away from things and have, again, I think performative is a little strong because I think they truly believe it and they're trying to protect themselves and all that sort of stuff. But I would be very careful to say, well, again, it's okay to not call it DEI and do the work, but you can't stop doing the work and pretend like you're still doing it.
Yeah, and I think, Karen, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I was going to say, if I may add a little something to that, the other audiences we need to be careful of as we navigate how we use the language and how we continue with the work is the communities that we were supporting. I'll use the Black Travel Alliance as an example and a lot of the Black travel creators that we have worked with. Pulling away from the language has impact. And you want to be careful that the communities that you are working with know that you are doing the work. So it's being honest, it's being humble, it's being open and direct. It's not just our partners, it's the visitors that we were focusing on, that we wanted to cater to, that they understand that this is work that is authentic to the destination. And pulling away from some of the language sometimes has a greater domino effect than we really understand.
Yeah, and what I'm thinking about as I'm listening to all of you is this there's business opportunity. I think Ronnie said it earlier. It makes business sense. There's a business case to be welcoming to different types of markets. And I'm curious, Ronnie, if you can comment maybe on what you are seeing businesses. I know we have some tour operators online, maybe travel agents, accommodations, attractions. Beyond just DMOs, what are you seeing them do to reach new markets?
I think one thing to think about is your day-to-day team. And are you in a position where you have a diversity of folks within that day-to-day team who can understand those different demographics and audiences? Not everybody has the capacity to do that because you have a small team, you have people who've been on for forever. So then how are you getting that information to learn about what those audiences need? You know, Karen has brought up Black Travel Alliance a couple of times, you know, and Wheel the World. So there are certainly consultants, there are content creators, there's content like this, but how are you learning about what those needs are? Making assumptions is not a great move. For, again, a smaller organization, you're not necessarily going to be able to do deep focus groups or intercept surveys or things in that way. So there is some amount of best practices. I will say, though, at a certain point, you need to be working with consultants or groups or folks who are from those communities. We've brought up in a wide array of different identities and communities here. And if you're talking about people with disabilities, which Lauren has had a lot of focus on, you can't just do that in a vacuum. You need to know what their actual needs are. And, you know, one of the things that I've found very ill-conceived was somebody's like, oh, you want to learn what it's like to be in a wheelchair? Go get a wheelchair and wheel yourself around. It's like, no, that's not going to help you understand what those actual experiences are. Maybe it will show you, oh no, I can't go up these stairs, but are you going to understand, you know, going into a hotel room and all the different aspects of what it is to be a wheelchair user? So making sure that you are having those connection points with folks to have that sense of lived experience is immensely important.
Great advice. Okay, back to Karen and Lauren. This question actually came in from one of our registrants when they registered, and the question was, how can small towns and rural tourism organizations with limited budgets and staff meaningfully implement DEAI practices? Lauren, do you want to start?
Sure. I would say start small, but start on something. If you know, it might be the smallest task or smallest thing you can bite off, but just start. We were fortunate to be able to utilize grants if they are available. Wisconsin has a tourism gem grant that we were able to tap into. The ARPA funding that made things more accessible for our organization with our limited budgets. Lean on those existing groups or partners that you can collaborate with to utilize your staff time the best you can. And I talked about it a little bit, like that digital presence you have. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of time or money to add those filtration tools on your website. You know, it's a little bit of time and energy perhaps, but it can really make a big impact on your website and who's using it and how they're using it. So it really is like that smallest task. If you can start having that forward momentum, just, I guess, start to do it.
Take that first step. How about you, Karen?
I can't agree more with Lauren. Start small, but start. And yeah, because if you don't pick something, you're going to keep talking about it and go in circles and circles and circles. So you and focus on what your community needs. Who is your community? What are the values? What are the players and the partners that are in your community? For us, I keep going back to it, we have Harriet Tubman, and Harriet Tubman's chosen hometown. So we had a strong narrative to base our work on, and we had community members that were dedicated and devoted to this work. and then start vetting what you do through the best lens that you can. I would advise against setting up a committee that is responsible for this work, because then all that falls on that committee. This is responsibility for everybody in your organization, for everybody in your board of directors. Is something that you need to bring forward to all your partners. So it starts with that introspective view and starts with honest conversations with your staff members and your board of directors. Especially as a small organization, you need everybody on board with this. There are inclusive principles in our work plans for every committee, in our job descriptions for every staff member, in our outreach to our partners. We have a series called the Pro Tip series that we put together as part of our educational branch to our partners. There are pro tips that focus on inclusive tourism, right? On DEI principles, on how you as an organization can do something. These are small budget things, but they do require the dedication. And if you're onboarding new staff, these are some of the questions that have to be on there. This is the organization that we are, this are the values that we stand for, and we need to bring staff on that understands that. Also with vendors, if you have any RFPs that you're putting out there to for any work that you're doing, if it's grant-based or not, add those questions to your vetting process. These are some of the things that are important to us. Make sure that when you have an RFP, there is a line on there. We are an organization who prioritizes support of all of our communities. And we have very boldly in there, diversity, equity, and inclusion is a principle of our organization. And your proposal will be vetted through that lens as well.
I want to add just something quickly in terms of some folks have been concerned about board diversity or staff diversity. You can always create advisory boards or other ad hoc or ongoing entities to bring in these other voices as well. And to the point of social impact and community engagement and all of that, it is a source of conflict I've seen, especially in rural destinations, where it's like, no, we have to have these folks on our board, or we only have this amount of spaces on our board. So coming up with another body to recognize those individuals who can contribute is another way to help the process.
Great. Okay, Ronnie, here's another, maybe a hard question, but I know some destination organizations who are open about their DEAI practices might risk losing funding. And so I'm wondering how you're seeing those organizations navigate that, throughout the US.
The first thing is that even the organizations that aren't worried about funding are walking away from it because walking away from the term DEI because it's just such a poisoned term, and you have people who don't like it for the reasons they've been made not to like it, and then you have folks who are like, oh, we can't use this because other people don't like it. So I find that a lot of organizations are walking away from it. Some are making the point of saying, no, we're just not going to say DEI, we're going to always call out diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I think the first thing is the language. This is where last year when I gave talks, I would say not using the term DEI because your stakeholders have told you not to is DEI. You're taking into account the thoughts, opinions, feelings of others, and then going, okay, we're going to adjust based on that. So I see no value in sticking to the term if everybody around you is telling you not to. It comes back to how are you embedding the work in what you're doing, but then how do you talk about the work has been a range. And the problem with trying to hew too closely to some of the things that are happening federally with the worries about grants is the term women is on some of those lists. So I don't know how far you can go to avoid any possibility of repercussion. The other thing that changed with the current Trump administration that wasn't happening with some of the state things in 2024 is they're also trying to dig out anything where you change the terminology and are still doing the same work. So I think there's only so far anybody can go to be doing this. You have to have those conversations, and like somebody would be having in an insurance or a legal conversation, you need to think about your exposure risk. And that's different based on the organization and where your funding comes from. So yeah, maybe you don't use the terms diversity, equity, inclusion, maybe use the terms welcoming or belonging, maybe you can use just the term inclusion. All that sort of depends, but if you're living in a world where you're worried about your funding being removed federally, there's a lot of whim that's happening there that's way beyond anybody's ability to forecast what comes next with that.
Yeah, a pretty realistic look at your risk. I like that you brought it back to kind of a business decision, right? And similar conversations that you would have about other types of risk or challenges. I think that's a good kind of framework to put it in. Okay, so I have one last question for the three of you, and then I'm going to open it up to our attendees' questions. And for this last question, I'm just really looking for what advice you have for our attendees as they are thinking about becoming welcoming to all, or working in the DEAI space. What is your final word of wisdom before we open it up for questions? And I'll start with you, Karen.
Be humble, be honest, be kind, be patient. This, going in this direction requires a lot of introspect and patience. It's a very slow moving road, and you will encounter skepticism. I mean, just I guess a negative thing to add to the whole conversation. When we first started this, we created wonderful posters. We talked about Harriet Tubman. I had a resident come up to me, is like, why would you even think about promoting such a criminal? Like, so you're going to hear these things, and you cannot be deterred by it. I like what Robbie just said. I found that very interesting. Not using DEI because you heard people tell you not to use DEI is DEI, because you just have to think about the individual and who are you talking to, and how do you support the individual for who they are, in all the aspects that make us one. But it's being patient, and realizing that this is not a checklist to take off and moving forward. This is a long-term commitment, and being prepared for that. So just be humble, be kind, be honest, be patient.
Great advice. How about you, Lauren? Final words of wisdom around these types of programs?
Yeah, I was going to say something very, very similar. Be honest, about where you're at, willing to listen, especially to those, that have lived different experiences than yourself. It doesn't happen overnight. Won't look perfect. But I think like the main thing that I've taken away from it is really you need to have empathy in this line of work, and lead with empathy, especially as a destination marketing organization. What would, asking ourselves, what would somebody feel like if they felt, like, how would they feel if they truly belonged here? How can we make it feel like they belong in our community? So really trying to lead with empathy. Yeah.
Fabulous. And Ronnie?
I'll build on what Lauren said about empathy. Guilt is not empathy. And I don't know how much guilt necessarily drives people. I don't want to say one way or the other, but empathy is about being in the other person's shoes. And I think when you're feeling bad about how much you can do rather than focusing on what you can do for other people, you're just not spending your time and energy and emotion efficiently. It's an easy thing to say, but I think, if you're really doing this work, it's about others. So making sure that that is what you're centering is important, and not just in a theoretical way, coming up with specific ways you can do this, actively listening, hearing, and being realistic. I do think that, a path I would not recommend is feeling guilty, saying you're going to do everything at once, and then being overwhelmed and not getting anything really done. It's a lot better way to go, okay, I know I can't do everything. I know I can't be everything to everybody. So what is realistic to move forward on, and taking it a step at a time. And I found that the individuals and organizations that do that and can really recognize their own progress and recognize the impact they've made on others, it feels a lot better than just kind of having a general sense of, I want to do this and I'm never doing enough. It's just, I ask people to let themselves, give themselves some slack on this. But also keep yourself accountable to what can you do. Absolutely.
Thank you. That was fantastic. I appreciate all of you being transparent and open, and it can be a hard conversation to have, and so I appreciate all the insights that you've shared. Camille is in the background here, and Camille, do we have any questions from our audience?
People are still thinking about their questions, but I'm going to put Karen on the spot again, because I know she did a lot of work to integrate the DEAI into her other work and just regular work. And you were looking ahead, Karen, and you protected your funding in some ways. You talked a little bit about the risks in your strategic plan, but I know you were looking around the corner. Even last year when we were talking about this, you saw that potential risk and you addressed it. And can you maybe give some tips or pointers on how those pieces that you've done?
You know what Camille's referring to?
Yeah, I mean, the funding thing is always challenging, especially if you're leaning on anything that's right now that's federal. It goes to the being honest part of it. We had conversations with our partners, we had conversations with our board directors, and I don't know, I don't have any solutions because we haven't found them yet, but it is conversations that we keep having, and it's just being aware ahead of time, hopefully. No, you caught me off guard on that one. I was like, what can I contribute? Yes, I mean, you're absolutely right. These are conversations that we've had. I just don't have solutions.
Yeah. Well, we were talking last year at Destinations International about how you don't have a specific budget item for DEAI, right? And you have it integrated into other thing, right? There's the overall Harriet Tubman campaign, or it's integrated into different pieces. And so you were looking at that as a way to mitigate the risk you saw.
Yes, but we didn't just see it as a way of mitigating the risk. We just saw it as a way to ensure that the work is integrated in everything that we do, so that it's not just a line item that is dedicated to this. It goes back to the same as our staffing and our board directors. This is everybody's work, and it's in everybody's task list one way or another. So therefore, the budget gets distributed evenly across the entire budget. We have which also makes it hard when people ask you about ROI. What is the return on the investment, this, and this? I don't have a line item that talks about that budget. And this program was not just so that I can fulfill a DEI initiative. It's a program that was important for the destination, for the partners that we have, and for the audience we're trying to attract. On that note, I'll bring up ROI. We went back and we looked at our work, and we decided this is not a typical how many people hit the website, how many people came and stayed here. So we created what we call impact multiplier. And this impact multiplier looks at bigger things. It looks at the growth of awareness. It looks at the leadership wins. It looks at the influence on future guidance. Me being here with you today, being asked to come speak on this, shows that we have made forward movement, that we have raised the conversation, and that to our board directors, it is important for us to be in these rooms to continue the conversation. That is a win. That is an ROI, and that is integrated in the work. It is not a separate line item, whether it is for the wins or it is for the money expenditure on it. So thanks for that lead, Paul. I appreciate it.
Thanks. We have a comment that I'll share with everyone. A lot to think about. Thank you to all of the speakers for your transparency and honesty in the work being done. I so wish more organizations were as frank and willing to focus on the individuals and visitors versus terminology. That's from Narissa.
Thank you, Narissa. Appreciate that. Well, no more questions coming in?
Not any that I see yet.
All right.
I have another one I was thinking about that maybe Ronnie could answer. Ronnie gave me the inspiration for it. Maybe Lauren wants to chime in too. But, you know, we talked about the obvious business case for doing this type of work. Do you see any threats to those demands, like potentially fading because of the cultural shifts that are coming into our world now?
You mean by demands?
Yeah, so like you're talking about like the SEO, you know, people saw there were searches for Black-owned businesses. Like, is there a threat to those demands fading?
I mean, this is one of those things of, you know, it's been a few years of legal questions and stuff like that with affirmative action in universities, and I don't see any lawsuit on the horizon to not be able to list Black-owned, disability-owned, diversity-owned businesses. So in that regard, I don't see a risk there. And on the flip side, the demographics are changing. The term that I've heard that I appreciate is new majority, meaning that now in some places and going forward in most places in the US at least, or not most places, in a lot of places in the US, especially urban centers, the majority of folks are not going to be white. You know, and to be relying only on one sort of clientele is not a great way to do business to begin with, especially when you're dealing with demographic realities. Even within the lane of disability, it's the one identity group, all those things that any of us can be in at any point, you know, from one to the other, from undisabled to disabled. So yeah, all these things to me, I see no reason to believe that somebody's going to stop the progress already happening with that dissemination of marketing based on different groups. And all the more reason that it's necessary is actually a piece that Danny Guerrero wrote, which I'll put in the chat, that it is very in alignment with this, which is just, this is life, this is reality, that you need to make sure that you are able to do all this, because these people exist and there's going to be more of them. So how do you not do this work?
Yeah.
I'd like to add a little something to that. Yeah. Unfortunately, I do, and I have started to see signs of it, of some organizations backing out from the work because it was solely based on a business case. Right? So it has to be a human case as well. It has to be the people that you're representing in your destination and the audiences that you're trying to attract to enjoy your destination or your museum or organization, whatever it is. It has to be based on both a business and a human case, because those are the ones that are like, well, it's not really business case anymore because there's always backlash and I don't want to be involved in it. So it's easy for them to pull from those projects. And that's why we've seen some funding being pulled as well, because they don't see it as financially profitable as otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question. How do you respond to negative comments?
With a smile and say, you have the right to your opinion. I hold to my opinion.
I think it depends on who they are, right? You know, is it the chair of your board, or is it, you know, a random community member that you haven't heard of before, who's reaching out because, you know, they heard something that's actually hearsay, happenstance, not even accurate. So this is where stakeholder mapping is really important, because you got to respond differently depending on who's talking.
Interesting. All right. Well, any more questions, Camille?
Not that I see.
Okay. Well, wonderful. Well, we'll give everyone about 3 minutes back in their day then. And I want to thank Karen, Lauren, and Ronnie for joining us, and also for our audience for staying on through the full session. I mean, it really does say a lot about your commitment to this work and to this topic and to being better tourism professionals. So thank you, everyone, and we'll see you all soon. Have a great week.